Good evening and welcome. Noswyddar, croeso. Thank you for joining us this evening. I can't see you, but I'm imagining that there's lots of very happy faces out there today. My name is Professor Tim Edwards, and I'm the Dean and Head of Cardiff Business School here at Cardiff University. You're here this evening to, as members of Alumni, staff, donors, and just general friends of the University and Business School in your capacity to support us. And here we're very excited this evening to talk to you about some significant research that's been conducted within the Business School. For information, the event tonight will be recorded, and in due course you'll receive a link afterwards which would really encourage you to share with colleagues and other stakeholders that you work with and are affiliated with. We have an important message to send this evening around the fashion industry and sustainability, and keen for you to share the work that's being conducted here. For those of you that maybe are not so familiar with the Business School, Cardiff University, we're a world-leading research-intensive business and management school with a proven track record in research excellence and teaching excellence. And we're very proud to be the world's first public value business school. What that really means is that we are committed to delivering economic and social value through our interdisciplinary teaching and research. And the key part of that is that this work tackles the grand challenges that we face in society, both here in Wales and internationally. We work closely with our stakeholders, Welsh Government, UK Government, industry, small and medium-sized enterprises, charities within Wales and across nations, with the intention of delivering shared prosperity and environmental sustainability. This is what we mean by public value, which is it's more than just economic prosperity, but it's also around economic participation and inclusion. And in that, we are entirely committed to addressing social inequalities and economic inequalities close to home and further afield. So the business school, as I say, is very much driven by this purpose-driven approach of public value of economic and social well-being and social justice. What I'm very excited to be introducing this evening is work that's been conducted within the business school on the fashion industry, and in particular, looking at how the supply chain strategies of fashion organizations can be changed to tackle climate change in a fair and socially just way. To do that, I'm really, as I say, very pleased to introduce two colleagues from the school. We have Dr. Hakan Karaosman, who is a world-renowned and award-winning expert in supply chain sustainability, who has a particular interest in fashion and textiles. Hakan has made a real name for himself in the industry, not just in the academic industry, but more broadly the fashion and textiles industry, and was named in the Vogue Best Business 100 Innovators category for the class of 2023 as a sustainability thought leader. So really pleased to have Hakan in the room today to talk about his research. But before Hakan comes on and talks directly to that, I'd also like to introduce one of his PhD students, Amy Boote, who's done some fascinating work in this space. And we will start shortly with Amy's presentation. They will be sharing their research and recommendations, as I say, and they will also be spending time this evening responding to pre-submitted questions from the audience, and if we have time, we'll also include Q&A from the audience, you yourselves. And so I would encourage you during the presentations, if you have questions that you want to pose, and as I say, we have time to allow Hakan and Amy to respond to them, we'll do that. So as I say, it's really exciting. I'm really pleased here to be here as head and dean of school to showcase the work of researchers in the business school. And what I'm going to do now is to hand over to Amy. I'm going to disappear and Amy's going to appear and allow her to do her presentation before Hakan.
Thanks, Kim. Hi, everyone. I can't see you, but I'm imagining all your faces there. So it's obviously an absolute pleasure to be able to talk to you all about my PhD research, which looks at climate change and gender inequality in the fashion supply chain and applies an ecofeminist perspective. But, before I get into all of that, I just want to break down and briefly explain kind of what the fashion supply chain actually looks like. So fashion is a global industry. Its supply chains are hugely complex with many different players stretched across many countries, especially in the global south. So to kind of give you a quick definition of the supply chain, it includes all the steps involved in making a product. So in fashion, this starts from raw materials, which could be cotton, wool, leather, or synthetic fibers. We then have the suppliers and manufacturers, who are the key players in transforming these materials into clothes. We then move to the distributors. So these are the people involved in collecting the finished garment and shipping them worldwide to retailers. The final step is you, the consumer. So this is really important to understand because with globalization, supply chains have become fragmented. Brands often look for the cheapest labor, which leads them to pushing production into countries with weak labor laws. So from one perspective, this creates jobs and economic opportunities, which can be seen as extremely positive for those in the supply chain. However, there's this downside. So these jobs kind of come with poor working conditions and a lack of protection for garment workers. So this is a problem as fashion brands say they bring economic opportunity, but their business models focus heavily on cutting costs, trying to find the supplier that produce their clothing at the cheapest and quickest rate possible. So this puts a huge amount of pressures on suppliers and ultimately their workers, most of whom are women already facing gender inequality in countries of the global south. So this might refer to countries such as India, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and a lot of these are kind of steeped in huge gender discrimination and bias. And currently, on top of that, climate change is making everything so much harder. So climate-related weather events such as heat waves, floods, storms, and rising sea levels are completely disrupting their lives. Yet the voices of these women, who are the garment workers, are often left out of this climate change discussion. So to really understand what's going on, I focus my research on Cambodia, a country that plays a critical role in fashion's global supply chain. So if we just take a look at why Cambodia is critically important. So Cambodia employs around 700,000 garment workers, and approximately 80% of them are women under 30, many supporting families on these incredibly low wages that the fashion industry pays them. So what's important to note here is that 95% of the factories these women are working in are foreign owned, from places like China, Singapore, Korea. So this means Cambodia doesn't have much control over the industry, making it what we call a captive industry. So this is where the economy is kind of tightly controlled by these outside players and they can't easily change direction, even if they wanted to do so. So on top of this economic vulnerability, Cambodia is extremely vulnerable to climate change. So Cambodia's workers are actually facing this growing threat of climate change on a daily basis. In the next 10 years, climate change could put 1 million jobs at risk, and more than 65 billion in apparel exports could be due to be lost to events like heat waves and flooding. So what I'm talking about essentially is a young, predominantly female workforce in a climate vulnerable industry with very little power to influence the systems that affect their lives. So kind of going into more of my research approach. So as I mentioned, it will be focused on Cambodia. It will be a case study. So essentially, this means I'll be having conversations with people who are on the front lines of this climate crisis. Specifically, I'll be conducting interviews with garment workers and the suppliers who supply one of our well-known UK high street retailers. So I want to capture their first-hand experiences with climate change and how it affects their work on a day-to-day basis. So numbers alone don't really tell us the full story. So I want to hear from the humans who are behind the supply chain and kind of bring their face to the forefront. So to do that, I'll kind of be answering three main research questions. Research question one kind of looks at how fashion brands and workers experience climate change. So think about factories shutting down, floods ruining shipments, or even consider the workers who are having to work in temperatures above 40 degrees just so they can make the clothes that you see in stores. Research question two kind of looks at how fashion brands and workers are adapting and like what strategies they're using to cope with these impacts. So this could be workers and suppliers kind of changing their shift patterns, putting in little strategies such as raising machinery off the floor to protect themselves from floodwaters. It could also mean that brands are abandoning suppliers who've been affected by events and choosing to relocate their manufacturing units. And then finally, research question three, we'll look at how fashion brands are going to use these insights to plan for a more resilient future. So think collaboration, maybe localizing supply chains. Who knows? We haven't done the research, so what will be. But ultimately, it will give a voice to those directly affected by climate change in the garment industry and provide actionable insights that can lead to more sustainable and resilient practices. So kind of moving a bit more to the academic side of things, I'll be using, as I've mentioned, ecofeminism. So this perspective has never previously been used in supply chain research. So I'm hopefully bringing something completely new. Essentially, I've chosen to use it as it shows how women and nature are treated as resources to be used and controlled, especially in systems that prioritize profit, power, and hierarchy. So these systems, which we call capitalism and patriarchy, often value economic growth over people or the planet. They tend to leave out the voices of those without power, like these women in the global south, even though they're deeply affected by these systems. Essentially, the supply chain is a product of these systems. And in the supply chain, we rarely hear the perspectives of garment workers, especially women, when it comes to climate solutions. You know, we're constantly fed glossy ESG reports, and a lot of these are focused on carbon emissions and about measuring and adapting. Nothing actually brings these women to the forefront. So ecofeminism pushes back on that. It values this women's knowledge, it values their lived experiences and their role in creating a more sustainable and fair system. So hopefully this approach kind of makes my work novel. It centers their voices and hopefully is something that is interesting for everyone. So kind of moving on to the equality, diversity and inclusion impacts of my research, which is kind of centered around what this webinar is about. Hopefully, my work will introduce a worker-centric perspective, as I mentioned. It will focus on the experiences of garment workers, particularly those in the most vulnerable climate regions. So this perspective has never ever been used in traditional supply chain research, which has tended to focus on corporate challenges such as shipping delays, costs, brand relations. You know, we simply don't have these answers. We just don't understand how the workers are being impacted, how they're adapting. So hopefully this will bring something completely new to the field. And it isn't just academic. Hopefully this will lay the groundwork for real change, giving brands the tools to help worker vulnerabilities and introduce more holistic climate resilience plans that have a wider diverse of opinions, including obviously these women. So you've heard enough from me. Thank you. I'm now going to pass over to Hakan.
Thank you, Amy. It was wonderful and very inspirational. And also thank you, team, for the great introduction. Hi, everyone. So pleased to be here. My name is Hakan Karaosman. I will walk you through my research and the things that we are creating in the space of policy and practice. And I am hoping you are seeing my slides. And let's discuss. And this is my LinkedIn. I am more than happy to get connected with you. So please feel free to reach out and to explain what I am doing and why I am doing what I am doing. I'm Hakan, I'm from Istanbul, Turkey, and this is the city of Istanbul, my hometown. The reason why I put this city is because Istanbul has two continents. Both Europe and Asia connect in one city. But Istanbul and being raised in Istanbul always shows you one thing: polarizations and binaries, east and west, north and south, poor and rich. And I also come from a low income family, which I am really proud of. And this is my late mother, and she was a garment worker. So she was my connection to fashion. And I love this industry because it actually helped us raise our family, but at the same time, it showed me what it means to be left behind. So coming from Istanbul, from a low income family, it was in my existence, it was in my DNA to understand how polarizations can be actually challenged and how we can challenge binaries to create a system which will work for everyone in terms of equality and equity. I am an environmental engineer by training, so I did environmental science, and climate change was one of my main research areas at the beginning. However, climate change and sustainability was another area. In terms of polarization, it was quite challenging because we separate environmental issues from social issues. We frame things around innovation and technology, but we don't talk about behavioral change. So that's why I was also trying to explore how we can talk about sustainability in holistic ways, how we can make sure people, especially marginalized communities like my mother, can be protected in climate action. And this brings me to one of my favorite persons on earth, Einstein. Einstein famously tells us that to change things, we need to change our thinking because we cannot change the way things in the same way of doing things because the way we frame things are quite wrong, which then lead to ecological collapse and social inequalities. So this is why I follow Einstein's thinking. We have to change things in radical ways, but that change starts from ourselves. And this was my wake-up call. I wanted to explore fashion supply chains to make sure what fashion means and how it can be an empowering tool to empower everyone across fashion supply chains, like my mother and all other garment workers. For the last 13 years, I am investigating fashion supply chains. I am looking at the system level. I actually look into luxury, mainstream, fast fashion, and I look at different supply chains such as leather, cashmere, cotton, and some other new types of fashion like circularity. But I realize one thing. We don't challenge the underlying business conditions. We try to change things, but actually what we do is just to frame things in convenient ways to protect the status quo. So on one hand, we try to be less unsustainable, but on the other hand, all we do is legitimize a business model which is broken. This is why I am here to challenge the underlying foundations of the business mindset and the knowledge patterns that we have, because we can't separate social issues from climate change. Everything comes down to the power and everything comes down to the power of people. So we need to empower people and we need to democratize fashion supply chains by giving agency to people. This is why I look at fashion supply chains, and this is one of my recent research projects. I look at fashion supply chains at multiple levels. So I go beyond garment manufacturing. I also go towards fabric production and yarn making. So I look at multiple tiers in the same chain to understand how we manage fashion supply chains from materials up until the consumers. And this is one of my recent research where I spent 7 months in the field in Turkey, which is a vertical country, which makes fashion garments from the farm level. So I spent my time speaking with the workers, with the people, to learn from their experiences. Because in these conversations, we don't create inclusive social dialogues. So I feel really empowered and excited to actually bring microphone to those individuals to learn from them. Because this is an interesting depiction. This shows us a pyramid. And you can bring this to your own context. You can bring this to your own industry. Wherever you are always working with people. These are your stakeholders. In my context, which is fashion, we are dealing with brands, suppliers, lower tier suppliers that provide services such as printing, dyeing, or embroidery. And at the bottom of the pyramid, we have workers, farmers, and communities. But this pyramid shows us the knowledge. Actually, when we move toward supply chains, we realize people have tacit knowledge. They know what they are dealing with, and their knowledge is really important. The most important innovation is coming from lower tiers because they have the ideas and they know their struggles, so they know how to deal with those issues. However, the problem in this industry is power asymmetry. Money is concentrated at the brand level, and this industry is ruled by a bunch of people which we call power elites. This is why the industry, in the fashion industry, but also in many other sectors, we are quite profit oriented. But then this brings down top-down decision making. So we don't create democratic and plural decision making structures. We are just creating standardized tools to govern and manage supply chains. But this creates cost pressure, and then that pressure manifests itself with paradoxical questions. And at the end of the day, everything is cascaded down onto the workers. That pressure is exacerbated, and that pressure is felt at the base of the pyramid, which is why it is important to talk with the people, to talk with the research participants. And I also want to underline one thing. Again, we need to break down these cultural barriers. These are not just research subjects. These are our participants, and we combine our research with their lives, but we are making this in empathetic and also inclusive ways. So we are creating research with our participants because we have so much to learn from them. So in my research, I am challenging the fashion industry around decarbonization and how they are embarking on sustainability. But to do this, I am using the concept of just transition. We cannot talk about sustainability without talking about the people, without talking about social issues. This is why, to me, justice is at the heart of everything. And when we look at just transition across so many other industries, we are realizing three things. Centralized, decentralized decision-making is the future. We need to make sure decision-making processes are inclusive and it represents everyone to protect everybody's rights. And communities must be informed in action plans. And this involves engaging with marginalized communities. Trust me, they have ideas and they know what they need to be doing and what must happen for them. So this is why we need to create these pathways to challenge and change the current system. And here we have three main principles: inclusive governance structures, evidence-based action plans, and reshaping transitions with the workers. You might not be in the fashion industry, but whatever you do, you are dealing with the people. So please just embrace them and learn from them. These conversations are quite important, and especially what we are going through in the world at the moment, we need social dialogues more than ever. At Cardiff Business School, I am so proud of being a member of Cardiff Business School because we are challenging the practice but also policy. We bring our research to different individuals, different stakeholders to challenge their thinking, but also to give them implications. So then policies can represent everyone, not just the brands. We are engaging a lot with policymakers, but also fashion companies to explain how supply chains should be reshaped and how we can move beyond risk mitigation toward people-centered supply chain management. And we don't do this alone. This is not about me or my research. This is about us. So we also collaborate with different scientists, different institutions, because disciplines need each other. And we are creating complementary, multidisciplinary research to really create societal and practical implications. And our research is awarded by multiple stakeholders because we try to bring those voices. And we are here to challenge and change the fabric of this industry. And this is my last slide. Cardiff Business School is a great place, and I am just tip of the iceberg with Amy and team tonight. We have so much talent. We have so much in our school. So please get in touch, learn from us. And this is my call for action, carbs in action. And these are how I translate carbs action into my implications for tonight's presentation. So we are empowering people by giving them agency. We are critical, we are transparent, and we are inclusive. So this is why we are here to create open and novel solutions with you all. So hopefully tonight's presentation is going to be the starting point of a much longer conversation. So I'm happy to answer your questions, and thank you very much for your time. And I'm really honored to be here. So thank you.
Thank you, Hakan, and thank you, Amy. So there we go. We're all on the same screen, which is great. Yes, so thank you very much to you both. I think what's significant for the work that you're doing is, and as you described in the last slide there, Hakan, is really what do we stand for when we talk about inclusivity and profitability? How do we work with our communities and stakeholders, and how can we think differently? Again, challenging the convention. And I guess within the business school is how do we do business differently? And this is the significance of this type of research, which is, obviously organizations have to make money, but at what expense and to whose expense, not simply the consumer. So again, thank you for that insight to you both. And Amy, your research looks really exciting. So and working in Cambodia looks like a great opportunity. So again, good luck with that. So what I'd like to do now is to start with some pre-submitted questions for this Q&A session and open it up to Amy and Hakan as and how they want to answer them. And then if we do have time, because we've got a couple of more minutes than I thought we might have, there's a couple of questions that have come through on the Q&A. So maybe if I start at the top with this one, and maybe I'll pose this to Hakan to begin with and let Amy have a think about it. And the question is, which companies would you consider to be the ones who need to change the most, and how, in respect to this question of inclusivity and sustainability?
Thank you, Tim. In the fashion industry, some companies are quite purpose-driven, but their supply chains are at the heart of their business model. So they really empower communities, whereas many mainstream brands, they are just creating a business model which is not actually supporting sustainability. So I don't actually want to name any fashion brands because at the moment, I don't want to legitimize a business model which is just legitimizing overconsumption and overproduction. However, there are some purpose-driven startups, emerging designers, but also there is so much innovation at the lower tiers, which is fabric and garment making. So we have so much innovation at those levels. And Tim, what is interesting is actually because those individuals need to survive. And this is why when you face scarcity, you become innovative and you become creative. What is wrong in the fashion industry? We don't create conversations. So brands are so detached from the reality. All we need is create social dialogues with which we can bring those examples to the front line, and then we can learn so much on how to decarbonize the system, because supply chains have the answers. We just don't know how to approach that level. We do as researchers, but the mainstream fashion brands don't get involved a lot with long-term holistic conversations. This is what we try to challenge in the industry.
Thank you, Hakan. Amy, would you like to follow on from that?
Yeah, I mean, unlike Hakan, I probably would name some of the brands that, need to change. I mean, the obvious is kind of the fast fashion giants we kind of are seeing emerge at the moment with their ultra fast fashion supply chains like Pretty Little Thing, Boohoo. I think it's really interesting that they have this exploitation that's happening kind of right here in the UK. For example, you have factories in Leicester linked to Boohoo's parent company. They were exposed for paying workers just £3.50 an hour. And more recently, we've kind of seen these brands trying to rebrand themselves, moving away from their current logos to this kind of quiet luxury aesthetic. And they're doing this, but without any real changes to their supply chain. There's no wage increases for their garment workers. There's no sustainability commitments. And it also seems like just this blatant attempt to kind of keep consumers hooked on ultra fast fashion, but under this different guise, basically. And I feel like the thing that needs to change is ultimately it's garment workers' wages and kind of bringing them to the forefront. If you're going to change your business model, why not change it to something that can actually empower the women who are making your clothes rather than kind of forgetting them? So yeah, I feel like real change kind of starts from putting them at the center of a business model, kind of not as an afterthought.
Great. Can I add one thing, Tim? So sorry,
Yes,
but
please
also,
do. No,
Amy,
go ahead,
great points. But I also wanted to underline price is not a real indicator of sustainability, because we know that actually luxury brands, most of them are not sustainable at all. So for the consumers, when we go to the store, how much you pay actually is not an indicator how much they are paying to their suppliers. So two things that you can actually look into your daily purchasing decisions, actually material composition. So when we buy things, pay attention to actually how materials are composed of. 100% cotton or 100% wool. So mixed materials are quite challenging also for our health and for our skin. And the other thing, if you want to make some research, take a look at their websites to understand how transparent they are when it comes to supply chain management. So if brands don't have information, then this is a red light. If they have things to tell, they do. But if you want to be a little bit more curious, start digging into some supply chain stories. And those that have real stories, they have means to tell them.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Hakan. You beat me to it there, because I was looking at the question from Caroline about, as a consumer, how do I know there's they're good on sustainable practices? And I guess there is no simple answer. There's no kite mark. There's no simple classification for us to follow. So really, if we're committed, we need to do something from that. So this kind of follows on, and maybe we can expand a bit this on another pre-submitted question, which poses the idea of, well, what changes would you like to see from a consumer perspective? So I'm reading into here that we need to be more diligent in how we think about our purchases. So can you elaborate a bit more on that, maybe, Amy and Hakan?
Absolutely. Amy, would you like to go ahead, or please go?
I feel like one of the best resources for consumers, like for anyone out there, is this website called Good On You. So it's a brilliant resource. They basically rate brands on their sustainability efforts, everything from animal welfare, material composition, garment worker rights, garment worker wages, and they'll give them a rating out of 5 and basically say whether you should shop there or avoid shopping there completely. So that's a great resource, and I feel like you should use your buying power as a consumer and only buy for the brands that are rated 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5. I think it's also quite a scary resource, because you realize brands who you thought might be sustainable really have nothing in place. Yeah, that's kind of where I've started, and I think that's just a great place to start from.
Thank you, Amy. And just building on what you are saying brilliantly, I think the most important question to ask team here is actually, Why are we purchasing? Why are we consuming so much? Because there's a void in our soul. And unfortunately, the system, which is capitalism, is just perpetuating this emotional void. And we are just pushed to consume. And I even challenge this term. We are not consumers. We are citizens. And we should be conscious. So our task is not to consume, but to have a life through love and empathy. And when I was a child, I always had clothing, which I loved and which I cherished. Now, today, we are losing that connection through our clothing. We don't love things anymore. I think love is a very important concept to bring back. I am not asking you not to consume, but I'm just asking you to consume consciously because our decisions are creating consequences for the garment workers and everyone else. And unfortunately, we have a big power with our purchasing wallet. So we need to use our money consciously to make sure we are actually supporting also small designers, individual designers, and also emerging artists. One thing that I also wanted to say, repair is quite important, but you might ask, how can I justify to repair something which buying something new is much cheaper? This is the entire paradox, and this is the elephant in the room. Because of fast fashion business model, we are creating literally garbage at no cost. But unfortunately, this is not even an argument to justify. We need to be conscious about the fact that our choices are also legitimizing a business model, and we need to be a little bit diligent and careful. My main suggestion also, when we buy things, try to turn them and try to see how stitching has been made, how quality it is, because if we are actually paying something quite little, then you will not be able to use them for after 2 or 3 use. And also there are health implications because our skin is the biggest organ, and the things that we are putting, especially products that come from some countries where legislations are not so strong, then there are health implications with the products that we are using, and it is dangerous. So that's why it is important to be cautious and careful about our choices.
Can I just follow up, Hakan? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but obviously, the concern is with having garments that are safe for use. But how do we know? I mean, is there research out there that has begun to shine the light on particular manufacturers or brands that we should be wary of? Is it about the combination of textiles put together? Is that a proxy for being a bit wary about the types of products we buy? Because up until now, I must admit, I would never have thought of the link between that and my purchasing decisions. It would never have come into my mind about what I was actually doing in that space.
Absolutely, it's a great question. And also, team, what we need in this space is legislations and regulations to protect the consumers. And also, with our research, we try to engage with the policymakers because industry is hijacking many conversations to protect the system. I will give one example. At the moment, 71% of the entire fiber which is used for garment production is polyester, is basically synthetics, is coming from petroleum because it is cheaper and it is much more convenient. So how on earth can we talk about a fashion garment based on petroleum? But this is the business as usual mindset. So we are trying to also explain to the policymakers that legislations need to protect natural fibers and also the producers of those fibers, because we are also talking about communities that create these fibers and that create these materials. Here, as a everyday consumer, it is difficult to understand all these dynamics, but we need some scientific tools, and we also need to be conscious of the fact that greenwashing is a very important dilemma, and many companies are using terms, the things that are not actually real. This is why legislations and regulations are quite important, and at the EU level, we are pushing some legislations to make sure consumers are protected. So bottom line is, my main suggestion to everyone that I'm speaking with, try to be conscious about the fact that materials are actually understandable when you read certain things, chemicals, and also material composition, because at the end of the day, this is all about your health and your own health and safety. Amy, would you like to chip in and bring your own experiences?
The other thing, I think, in terms of consumers you're talking about repair. I think the other thing that's kind of on the rise at the moment is rental, and you don't have to own the clothes that you're wearing. If you've got an occasion coming up, that's kind of when I think you see people buying something for that one wear. We literally wear an item of clothing 7 to 10 times before it's thrown away now. And I think if you rent a dress or you rent a suit for a wedding, like I don't know, the impact of that is just so much less. And I think it's something that we should all start engaging more in. And I feel like a lot of consumers nowadays kind of think that taking something to a charity shop is doing good. It's passing the clothes on to people who might need them, or it's giving it a second lease of life. But in reality, these clothes are probably going to end up in these secondhand clothing markets in Ghana. They're going to end up in landfill. Like Hakan said, you need to kind of put that love back into your clothing and kind of realize where it's coming from. And if you can't do that, then maybe rental is an option for you, and you don't need to own everything that you're wearing.
I think challenging the conventions around business, but also consumption, is where you're heading here. I've got one question, and it may be we'll have this one and maybe one more if we've got a little bit of time. I'm just going to push the envelope a bit in terms of our timing, but we will finish at 6. Do we know how impactful the push for reuse and recycling has been, our side in the Q&A? Can we begin to measure the change in behaviour around that form of consumption? Can we start to show the benefits?
It's a great question. At the moment, no, because also recycling is the last resort. Because in the circular economy, we have a waste hierarchy, and actually the recycling is the last option. And also, team, one thing is mixed materials cannot be recycled. We don't have the technology. We only have some startups at the moment, but we are not at the scale. If you look at the industry, why things are so cheap? Because it is mixed material with polyester and a bit of cotton. So this is why we need to be conscious of the fact that our daily consumptions are not supporting this mindset, and we are not at that level. Resale is now actually blossoming, and people are all jumping on resale, but actually the real consumption patterns don't change. We just again consume more and more, and then the retail is creating another level of pollution through logistics. So we don't actually tackle the business issue, or we don't tackle the underlying problem. We just try to create an additional business. Here, my main suggestion to the consumer will be, let's cherish and let's embrace what we have. Of course, you can buy new things, but also re-wearing something is beautiful, and we should be proud of what we have. So don't be afraid of using what you already have. You don't need to purchase new things at every occasion. So we are just also seeing lots of greenwashing in the space of recycling, reusing, reselling, etc. So we have to be quite conscious of the fact that our choices should be more personal and personally impactful.
Thank you, Hakan. Well, we didn't get to all the questions, but I think we integrated most from the audience. So we're going to have to call it time for today. Diolch to both Amy and Hakan for their lovely presentations, and you can clearly see this means a lot to the people that are involved in the research. So thank you for sharing that with us. I've really thoroughly enjoyed myself. I hope those, and I would like to thank those in the audience of the webinar for coming along this evening, early evening. We will follow up this particular webinar in a few days with another email where we will be sharing the link to the recording. And again, as I said at the very beginning, I do hope that you'll share those with others who would find this work of interest. It's significant, and it's great that it's happening at Cardiff Business School. As I say, this is one of many events that will be coming up in the near future over the summer. And our next one, which is on the 7th of May, is about the gene hunter, which sounds fascinating, where students take on bowel cancer in their research. So again, a really fascinating and important and significant piece of research taking place there. You will, in the email that you'll be sent, be given information about how you might be able to volunteer and support research at Cardiff University. And so I hope that the work that we're doing is of enough interest that you would be interested to work with our colleagues here and across the institution. So with a minute to go, so hopefully the organisers will be pleased with me. I'd like to say from myself, Hakan and Amy, a thank you and a goodbye, and see you again at another event.
Thank you so much, team. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.